Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today it's time for another devblog for the HMS Grafton. But before we get into it, we have two pieces of news which have come out today. The first one is that Gaijin have released a changes in rewards multipliers and repair costs explained. So with this said, they did a bunch of economy changes and basically changed the repair costs and the multiplier difference for what you actually get out of a battle for some vehicles. Now, what they only listed before was the repair costs and not the multiplier difference. Now, today we have the multiplier difference and repair costs explained, so I'll leave a link in the description for that. I'm still going to go through the videos looking at the different repair costs, but understand that these are now affected by different multipliers. So there is a bit more to the story now, where before it was just about flat difference in repair costs. The next one is that we have some more dev server changes on October the 19th, illustrated by Mike 10D here on Reddit. The link will be in the description for this if you want to go and have a look. So the first one is the JU288C has got its GE cost cut by a lot, which is lovely to see. 7,100 GE for a 5.3 aircraft was incredibly high, even though the aircraft itself, for me, is an aircraft which is going to do really well, and is a unique one. The 7,100 tag for what is, a 5.3 vehicle seemed a bit high, so it's getting dropped. Just remember that we will have an anniversary event of some type around the 1st of November for War Thunder, and I'm guessing they're going to slash GE costs, so you might even be able to pick this up for 2,440 Golden Eagles, and if you buy the Golden Eagles at half price. The MB175T is going from rank 2 to 3, so it'll be better at grinding out rank 4, 3, 2, which is good. And the FV4005 is getting a reload time buff, so it's going down by around about 3 seconds, I believe 3.4 seconds to be exact. This doesn't make a huge difference to the FV4005, but it is a nice change. It will mean that across the board you'll have faster reload times. The main issue with the 4005 still is that it doesn't always one-shot what it hits, and with a reload time like that, it needs to one-shot everything that it hits. The Type 75 MLRS is going from rank 4 to 5. This was discussed in an earlier devblog that I looked at. And then the Churchills, the more accurate main gun rotation limits, so reduce model clipping. That's good as well. The Centurion Mark One, the empty mass has decreased, the loaded mass has decreased, and the horsepower has increased. So what this means is you got a lower weight, you got a higher horsepower. This thing should have better acceleration, and I doubt better top speed, but it should at least have better acceleration. Now, that is great for the Centurion Mark One. It's actually a really fun machine. I wish the Sabo did a little bit more damage, but the AP is definitely good enough. And also, it would be nice to, at some point, get a version of it with the coaxial 20, but that is just hoping. There's also some new round types, the SAP and the SAP BC. These are used in the 152mm 45BL Mark 12 cannon. I'm not exactly sure which cannon that is, but that does sound like a ship cannon. We do have some SAP rounds for ships already, I believe, on the higher tier British destroyers and light cruisers. Maybe just the light cruiser, the HMS Enterprise, but I definitely remember seeing a name like that. We also have some new text lines. So we have a minimum BR, minimum battle rating of vehicles, maximum BR, maximum battle rating of vehicles. Seems bog standard. Probably just clarifying some certain things for, matchmaking purposes. Then we have disable option name to have more choices. I'm not exactly sure what this is talking about, unless it's talking about how to, help in disabling nicknames or disabling names of tanks or names of aircraft, stuff like that. Then you have the two changes for the actual rounds themselves. So you have the SAP tank and SAP BC tank. These are the semi-armor-piercing shell and the semi-armor-piercing ballistic cap shell. Both of these have also been added to the text. And the Warrior is getting a much more British name, which is nice. Before it was just the FV510 Warrior. Now it has its proper name. The Combat Vehicle Personnel The personnel tracked 30mm gun, Warrior FV510. If you've ever hovered over any of the British tanks, you'll realise that they have absolutely crazy names, and it's wonderful. It's something that, very much like the Germans, the British pretty much just named something what it actually was, and then you had like a nickname. So, in the terms of the Warrior would be the nickname, and then the rest of it would be its actual name. Anyway, let's get on to the Devblog. So the HMS Grafton, the H89, this was one of the not top tier destroyers. It was actually at 4.0 on the dev server instead of 4.3. And the British actually have a ton of different destroyers. Some of them are kind of similar, but this one definitely looked not as good as obviously the 4.3s. The reason for this is even though it has the 4 120mm, which are sat in a very nice configuration, the speed wasn't as good, and also the fact that it has not the best AA armament definitely will put it on a lower echelon towards the other British destroyers. And the thing is, with a machine like this being 0.3 BR different to stuff like the Tribal class and the other machine that we looked at the other day, the Battle D14, the Battle Destroyer, will people, once they research stuff like the Battle D14 or the Tribal class, or maybe they buy the Hider, would you want to play the HMS Grafton? And that is the question that always looms over the whole thing. If you have, what is the advantage of taking a HMS Grafton over something like a Battle Destroyer? The only thing I can see as an advantage is the fact that with the G-Class, the H89, you will not get uptied as much, and you have the ability to get into a 3-0 battle instead of a 3-3 one. But overall, when we look at generally what it's made of, it's definitely of a weaker tier than the other destroyers we have. This is what it looks like in game. Obviously, it doesn't have a lot of armor on it, basically just some armor covering the guns, and the 4 120mm are actually spaced out in a pretty nice way. You have two up front, as you can see, and then if we just switch around, which hopefully I will eventually, we're getting there, you have two on the back as well. So one of the problems with the Battle Destroyer we talked about the other day is it has its main guns all on the front of the damn thing. So if you shoot the front of the damn thing, what ends up happening is that you will be able to knock out its main guns quite easily, and also the ammunition is all in one area, so you only really have one target to shoot at. With the G-Class, because you have guns on the back of it, and guns on the front of it, when it comes to its primary guns, you have a situation where even if you knock out some of them on one side, you still have to compete with the other 120s. So it's harder to knock out the main armament of a destroyer like this compared to like a Battle Destroyer. What you lose from this though, as the Vickers here, as the G-Class will show here, you lose a lot of AA armament on this machine. It has a bunch of Vickers machine guns, it has two turrets with quad Vickers, and you can actually see them in the center here. They are right here in the center. So if they are not firing, or if they are out of position, like let's say you decide in your aircraft to actually come from the front of the G-Class here, those Vickers machine guns are not really going to help you too much, and therefore this thing is much more susceptible to aircraft than something like a Tribal class or a Hider or so on and so forth. What you do get though is 8 torpedoes, which is lovely. They're also in 2 racks of 4, as you can see in the middle of the ship here. And what that means is that you have great versatility on where you can throw these things. You can either throw them to the right or the left. You can cover a substantial area with them, which is really nice to see. You do lose a little bit of speed though, and with this speed comes maneuverability. With a crew of 145, you should have pretty decent survivability, but compared to other destroyers, it should be very similar or worse survivability. But when it comes to the speed, if you are slower in these machines than your destroyer counterparts, you will be slightly less efficient. You will be slightly less efficient on where you get to, you'll be slightly less efficient on being able to maneuver, and those little differences between these destroyers, which are very similar to each other, can make a massive difference. And that is what we are seeing in this machine, and that is why it is a slightly lower battle rating. As you can see in the front there is huge ammo storage for the 120, so I would say those are the weak spots to aim at to make this thing go pop, and it does have them on the front of the machine, and it also has it on the back, with the 120s that you can see back there. Massive fuel tanks as well to set on fire, and with the fact that this thing doesn't have a lot of armor, what you can end up doing is just spraying a bunch of HE and trying to make this thing go pop, which is basically, I'm sure, what a lot of people will be doing. The engines themselves being set up in what can only be described as a two set, I suppose, when you look at the game. A lot of people said how the engines are mislabeled. The parts of the X-ray which are labeled engines are wrong, and I understand that. But I have to go by what the X-rays say. Don't hate the player, hate the game in this regard, I think. But yeah, then you have the two transmissions, which will be hard to take out. So, when it comes to shooting this, machine, I don't really see the point in shooting it in the center. All you're going to do is knock out its maneuverability, which is generally going to be worse than the top tier vehicles you were dealing with anyway. So it's much better just to try and either hit the crew in that central part or try and make it ignite through an ammunition explosion. As you can see, you start off with HE. The HE itself has 35 millimeters of penetration. It has explosive mass of 3 kilograms, which is pretty decent, and a muzzle velocity of 808 meters per second. The fire rate on these guns, the 120 CPXIXs, are actually good as well. The overall feeling of this machine is good when it comes to its weaponry. It also has access to APC-BC rounds with 161 millimeters of penetration, same muzzle velocity, obviously slightly less explosive mass. One of the problems that APC-BC is running into, and I think this will be fixed over time once full armor models are actually modeled into a lot of these ships, when you shoot an area which doesn't have any armor modeled in right now, then the APC-BC just goes straight through and doesn't really do anything unless it hits a key component. So you have to be a lot more accurate with an APC-BC shell compared to the HE where it splashes, and you can do more internal damage. So the HE is great for fires, it's great for knocking out components right now, but once we start getting, armor models which are very similar to tanks, where everything on the armor model is modeled, then the APC-BC will then start reigning supreme. This thing also has a bomb mortar on it. If you want to see this demonstrated, I demonstrated it, I believe, on the Hider, which does have one, and I also had a look at it on another vehicle as well. So with that said, that is pretty cool. If you don't know what a bomb mortar is, when it comes to this, a bomb mortar is something that flings off mortars in one direction or another. Some of the modifications actually mean that you can fire off depth charges from the back, so you fire them off in a right and left fashion, and others, it has a bomb mortar on the front of the ship which fling them forwards in about 200 or 300 meters. So generally, I can't see those being that useful, but when they're going to hit, it's going to be very fun. The main armament of the G-Class, though, is good. It's very similar to a lot of the other destroyers we have. The issue it has, though, is the AA component and the maneuverability. It is not as good as the 4.3s, and it shouldn't be. But the question is, why would you take this machine over a 4.3? What is the great reason to do so? It's not the fact that you can build a lineup around it, because there's only one of them. It's not the fact that it's as good at a lower BR as these, or it's not the fact that it's not going to face 4.3s over and over again, because it is. So the only way I can see this being used is when you are researching the Tribal, the N-Class, and the Battle. I see this as a vehicle that's, instead of, being a meta vehicle, one that you get through to get to the meta vehicles, which are going to be these 3 destroyers that are 4.3 for the British. But overall, it is nice to see another destroyer. The Royal Navy tree is looking amazing. Compared to all the other trees. It's looking great while it has come out. Remember when the Soviets were released? I believe they had 2 destroyers, and one of them was premium. The other one that was in the tree was in rank 3, was not even a destroyer. For Britain, we have 6. Crazy stuff and great to see. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.